you're now in an environment where you can say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move you over to a spare PC, and then I'm going to go and sort that problem out in my spare time. And that can all be managed remotely. Another interesting point that our customers tell us is by moving the PCs into a controlled, centralised environment, they're actually extending the physical life of the PC. So that, coupled with the fact that we are now enabling upgrades to be made much more simply, means you're starting to see the asset lasting 4, 5, 6 years. Typically, customers say, well, we get a pretty even split of savings to the IT department and savings to the line of business. One area where large organisations are seeing real cost benefits is in user productivity. This particular example with an American bank, they were seeing an additional 9 hours of uptime per user per year, and across a very large user base, that's $2 million in salary. They were able to put more users in the building itself, and as I said before, they were able to sweat the asset more easily, so they're able to extend that the usable life over 5 years. And as a result, we offer a 4 or 5 year maintenance on the equipment, and I know a number of people in the room here have taken us up on that in the past. What does that actually really mean? Well, in this particular example, even though they were previously using Dell PCs with a $1,200 acquisition cost and a comparable PC over IP implementation maybe as much as $4,500, $5,000 per seat, you can see over 4 years that we were actually able to deliver a saving of $4 million if you look at total cost of ownership. Moves out and changes, you can see, particularly impressive by saving this organisation $250,000 a year just on moving their users. And I don't know what it's like here, but typically we see about 1.5 moves in the lifetime of a PC in a typical customer. So why did we choose to partner with Teradici? What does PC over IP give us? Well, it basically just builds on everything I've said. It allows us to take our previous architecture, which was limited by distance, because we were remoting the user over an analog structured connection, and it allows us to blow that distance apart. So back in the data center, we still have our blades, but now these will run across a standard IP network in terms of delivering the remote protocol. That's completely operating system independent. There are no drivers, all applications run as normal. And out on the desktop, we have a small device, as you can see here. We've got our quad head device and our dual head device here. Driverless, stateless, very low power, and they're effectively just a very simple hardware bridge for graphics and I/O. We can support dual monitor and quad monitor. And typically, this is where PC over IP is being used today. In the CAD/CAM environment, particularly where we're seeing an uptake on this, is where you've got third-party suppliers wanting to do some collaboration work, and everyone wanting to come together and looking at documents and editing documents jointly. In the healthcare profession, we're particularly seeing it simply because of PC over IP's ability to build to a very, very high resolution lossless image. On the trading floor, it's no surprise. It's very much down to the fact that we can deliver latent-free, very high resolution, very fast-moving images over large distances to multiple monitors. And the government, it's all around security, and in digital signage, it's all around being able to remove the PC from that actual physical point where it's very difficult to get access to and difficult to maintain. What is the PC over IP experience? Well, hopefully later on today you'll be able to experience it for yourself. But basically, you've heard of thin clients. Well, you'll now hear people talking about zero clients. There's absolutely nothing on the client in terms of an operating system or anything that needs managing or something that could be attacked by a virus, etc., etc. It's a true PC experience, so that's any application, any video, any audio, full frame rate. It's exactly as if you were sat at the workstation or the PC yourself. One of the most important differentiators for PC over IP is that all the encryption is done off the CPU. So there is zero loss of CPU cycles. So it doesn't matter whether you've got a single processor dual core, or dual Xeon quad cores, all that performance is being delivered to the end user in terms of application performance. None of it's being used by the PC over IP encryption. Portability is very key, as we said. Now that we've blown the distance limitation away, you can have a primary data center in one location, let's say Asia, a secondary data center in, let's say, New York, and that can be powering 4 or 5 or 6, 7 or 8 regional offices globally. And that's exactly how people are now implementing their disaster recovery. More importantly, you can actually be moving those data centers out of prime real estate areas and putting them somewhere else. The other thing you'll see here today, and start to hear people talking about, is PC over IP for virtualization. So Teradici's teamed up with VMware to now give the user a choice of zero clients, so hardware-based PC over IP or software-based PC over IP, and it's all completely interoperable. So you can have hardware hosts serving software clients, hardware to hardware, software to software, or a mixture of both. And you'll see that demonstrated here today. One important point to mention in any environment, whether it's hardware to hardware or hardware to software, is that all USB redirection is completely transparent. It's a simple USB bridge. It's independent of the operating system, independent of the application. So you plug in a USB peripheral and you just know it's going to work. As I said before, all the rendering is done on the chip, so that's all enclosed within the data center. So everything that's broadcast to the devices is simple pixel-only encoding. That means that you're completely independent of any network latency, and it also means that you're application independent, which means you know all future applications are going to work. You don't have to worry about, is this an environment which which is future-proof. It's not just a technology for local area networks. About 3 years ago, when we first got involved with Teradici, you needed a minimum of something, that's right, 3 to 4 megabits or something like that, wasn't it, Scott, per user, per screen to get a real PC experience. With the current revisions of the firmware, in sub 1 megabit situations, you can still get a full user experience, and they're talking about sub 200k coming very shortly. Average bandwidths are well below that. Scott was telling me yesterday that there was you had a minimum sort of background noise level at 100k, didn't you? Yeah. Which you've now reduced that down to about 10k.
Yeah, so, that's right. Just recently we've got down to around about 10 kilobits per second. Basically there's some heartbeat stuff that goes on.
So we're talking about very, very small amounts of bandwidth required per user. And in terms of network latency, around 150 milliseconds is easily handled right here, right now, and that's going up to 250 milliseconds quite shortly. In an environment, anything over about 100 milliseconds, there's a local mouse cursor pointer caching that can be done so that you as a user don't experience any latency with the mouse pointer tracking. One of the important points here that I just wanted to mention is that the way PC over IP does its encoding, because it's offloaded, because it's not dependent on the CPU, because it's application independent, you no longer have to balance network loading with CPU loading and user experience. You can have all three. Okay? It doesn't matter how much you try and encrypt this, how much you try and compress this. It's not going to affect your CPU experience, and it's not going to affect your user experience either. So this is quite a busy slide, but it's basically taking the slide Nicholas showed you earlier, the pyramid, and showing it in a different way. What we've done is we've taken that pyramid of users, so here from your one-to-many task workers through knowledge workers up to your traders, and applied the ClearCube solution that's most appropriate. And we've done the same over here at the client side. So you can see we've got true zero clients, whether that's our I-9420 or I-9440 or PC over IP enabled displays. And then down here in the VDI space, we've got our I-8520 thin client that's PC over IP and View4 enabled. Over on the data center side, we have our range of Blade PCs. So that's the R series and the A series that I mentioned earlier, and our N series, our 2U workstations. So depending on your application type, depending on whether you want to serve up a one-to-one hardware-to-hardware environment, or whether you want to serve up a virtual desktop hosted on one of our blades, we've got a PC over IP solution for you. Just a very quick slide on Central. as you can imagine, when you're talking about such a complicated environment with a mix of hardware types, a mix of user types, you've got to have something in the middle to actually make that whole thing hang together. So, without going into any great detail, think of Central as a connection breaking tool primarily, but also a tool to manage the thin client and to manage the host in terms of patch management, sending out firmware updates, health and status, load balancing, all those good things.